you are taking all of those emotions that are uncomfortable to feel, that overwhelm, that frustration, that resentment, which none of those feel good, and we just push them down and we don't do anything with them. And then we carry on and push through because we have a job to do.
As many of you know, our kids have been through a lot recently, and so have our teachers. And there's been this kind of culture of toxic selflessness that we're supposed to just show up, leave our emotions at the door, and be present always, no matter what's going on around us. And this sense of anxiety and overwhelm and absolute burnout has been infiltrating our school systems. And this is where our teachers just feel completely exhausted and incapacitated. And this today is where my incredible friend Jen Rafferty is making an impact to bring those tools of self-care, of helping teachers learn how to regulate their own nervous system, how to take care of themselves so that they can be better for our children, and then also share those incredible tools and resources with our kids. I mean, there's no question that we've just been through the most challenging few years of our entire lives, and the psychological impact on our children has been enormous. Well, it has too on our educators. So Jen Rafferty is just a complete heroine in my book. And in this episode, she talks about her program she created, Empowered Educator, and why she created this, and the tools that she supports her teachers and school educators and leaders in the school system to use for themselves so that they can better take care of themselves. How to change the language around self-care, around being very cautious about our own emotions in terms of allowing them and not continually emotionally bypassing them. She's amazing. You're going to love this interview. You're going to see she just lights up when she talks about this. She's enormously inspirational, and I cannot wait for you to meet this incredible woman. Join me in welcoming Jen Rafferty. Hello, and welcome to the Business of Happiness podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Tarryn MacCarthy, and guys, I'm so excited about today. We have with us an incredible human being who is so powerful, inspirational, and really making a big impact in the world of education, taking care of our teachers so that we can take care of our future. Please join me in welcoming Jen Rafferty. Hello, my friend.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so pumped to have you because I just think that now is such an important time to be having this conversation. And I want to honor you and say thank you for everything you are bringing to education and how valuable it is right now. I think, looking back over these past few years and how much support our teachers have been for our students, for our children over this COVID time period. I mean, I could be brought to tears just knowing how impactful the teachers in my kids' life have been. And here you are taking care of those teachers. And I just want to say thank you.
Mm, yes. Well, it's something that is near and dear to my heart. I was a teacher in the classroom for 15 years, and I taught through 2020. And, I've noticed that there's this toxic culture of selflessness in education. And the truth is, if the most generous thing we can do for our students is take care of ourselves. And what I do is I teach educators to do that, take care of themselves.
And you talk about this so beautifully as well. You are a presenter, you're an author of an incredible book to support team members within a staff of how to find their place in that teaching staff. But you also run these great programs, and one of the things that I admire about you, Jen, is you're offering that support for teachers to see themselves differently. So speak to us a little bit about that, about you mentioned 2020, about that journey of how the Empowered Educator came to be.
Sure. So, there's a couple of things to this. I think the first thing is that we have this idea that the kids come first. And that's wonderful, but it's not serving us well because we're ignoring the adults. And part of the outcome of understanding what needs to happen in schools right now is there's this big push for social emotional learning programs, and they all focus on kids. And yes, of course, the kids are important. We need to teach them how to do, you know, a million different things when they're in school, right? It's more than just reading, writing, arithmetic. However, if you don't have, for example, conversational Spanish skills, you can't really teach Spanish. And if we're asking teachers to teach social emotional skills, and we don't actually give them the tools to learn about their own social emotional well-being, it's not going to work. So yes, I've observed over my years of teaching so many teachers feeling burnout and frustrated and activated by kids who are dealing with their own traumas and actually escalating a situation that if they just had a couple of self-awareness and self-regulation tools themselves, can actually approach these situations much more differently and create learning opportunities for just not that kid, but the kids around and for the other adults that are involved in that situation. And it's just not a sustainable way to keep going, especially now that this is kind of like post-COVID era and everything seems to be on fire and piling up, piling up, piling up. If we're not stopping and taking stock of how we are as the adults, we're not actually able to help the kids. So that's kind of where this came from. And then, logistically, the story goes I was divorced and moved out of my house the weekend that the world shut down.
Mm.
And I had all of a sudden overnight was, not a wife anymore and had a different relationship with my job. I had to now teach online. I had to homeschool my own kids and I was in a new space. And on top of all the other things that were going on, I too had to work through my own feelings of overwhelm and frustration and stress to prevent burnout. So this program evolved. Really, that was kind of the turning point from me, and it evolved since then.
So it seems to me that looking back over the past few years, as you mentioned, there's been this like long term toxic selflessness, value, if you can call it that, within the education empire. And over the past couple of years, we've squeezed that lemon even harder. We've expected even more from our educators, and not just in terms of time and dedication of time and, stretching the hours per week, but emotional expense as well, and expected our teachers to not be reactive, not be triggered, to be able to be 3 steps ahead of everything in terms of technology, but also in terms of our children's needs. And we've literally gone through a moment in time that's never been experienced before in terms of the psychological impact of our kids in the classroom. And when you say, how can we ask our teachers to know what to do if we don't educate them? I mean, it's so obvious to me. There's been no support in a big way for our teachers to go through this unprecedented time with our children.
100%. And they're dealing with their own lives.
Yeah.
They're dealing with their own lives of whatever's happening at home. I shared my example of, what was going on with me, but there was a lot of loss during COVID. There was a lot of change during people were afraid for their own health, their children's health, their parents. So they're, like you said, they're squeezing that lemon without understanding the tools that need to happen. And here's the thing too, Tarryn, which I think is really important, is that it's easy to point the finger and say, well, we need this, we should have done this, and why didn't this happen, or why wasn't this in place? But these fractures in the organizational systems aren't going to change unless people change.
Mm.
Organizations don't change until people change. So if the people who are making these bigger decisions don't understand the value of their own self-awareness, self-regulation, they're not going to make policy that reflect that.
Mm.
So the work that I do, in going in and helping teachers understand these skills and then and then implement them in practice is creating organic universal language and culture that provides a space where everyone understands, well, this is just how we operate here. We take care of ourselves.
Beautiful, beautiful. And putting that as a priority.
Oh, 100%.
Mm.
You are your number one priority. And that too is a radical idea with the people that I speak to, because in the service industry, as teachers, we're public servants. Again, there is this toxic idea that everyone else is first. And then
Mm.
we are complaining and overwhelmed with everything that's on our plate, right? This proverbial plate that is never big enough and is just perpetually overflowing. It's just a constant struggle. Whereas if we realize we're actually in charge of our own plate, we get to decide how much of our resources, time, energy, attention, money goes into different things on our plate. Not everything can get 100% of those things. And
Mm.
that's where we start to flip the script and understand our agency and become empowered in how we go about our day.
And what an important thing you were mentioning about modeling that for our students. I mean, this is our opportunity to really change that conversation from how you and I were raised.
Oh, absolutely. It's funny. It was just talking about that this morning with the group of people I was with. We tell our kids it's okay to feel your feelings. It's totally okay. And, my 7-year-old has no problem letting me know when she's unhappy,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Um, but then as we get older, the ways in which children express their emotions are no longer appropriate. Yet we aren't explicitly taught other options to express our emotions. So we don't. And then we shove them down. So as educators, we tell our kids, okay, yeah, it's okay. You can cry. It's okay to be angry. We understand that you're frustrated. But what's modeled for them is emotional bypass,
Mm.
and they don't actually see the adults in their lives express their emotions in a healthy way. And like our actions speak so much louder than our words. So what is the message that they're actually getting? They're actually getting the messages, it's actually not safe to feel my emotions. And I don't know how to express my anger when I'm 14. I don't know how to feel sad in a way that doesn't associate with shame or judgment, when I'm in a group of friends and my feelings get hurt. It changes as we get older, but we don't have the skill set because we weren't taught.
Mm. And we also have set this crazy standard for ourselves of resilience and powering through and being above it or, having expectations of ourselves having evolved beyond that emotional hit or feeling those triggers. And so I just think that the work you're doing is so important in that regard to remind us that that's just not true.
No. So, and that's the thing about resilience. Resilience is wonderful if you get there correctly.
Yeah.
you know, a lot of times we experience what we think is resilience, and especially people who have gone through lots of hardships. And I'm going to talk just now about educators because that's, where we are today, but this is really anyone. But we wear it like a badge of honor.
Yeah.
Look at how resilient I am.
Mm.
When in fact, you are taking all of those emotions that are uncomfortable to feel, that overwhelm, that frustration, that resentment, which none of those feel good, and we just push them down and we don't do anything with them. And then we carry on and push through because we have a job to do, or
Mm.
we're a mom and we got to bring our kids to soccer practice, or, we have to be there for our partner, or the dog still needs to go to the vet, or, da 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 da. And then everything it goes in front of where we are, and it leaves us feeling completely depleted,
Yeah.
or we get sick, or if you're me, your back goes out.
Mhm.
And that isn't resilience, that's emotional bypass. And so it's only until we acknowledge the feelings that we're feeling, understand the ways in which we can release that emotion in a healthy way, then we can come to a place of resilience, which is truly, in the true meaning of the word, is bouncing back completely. But we can't do that if we have emotional tugs that are keeping us from doing that.
Yeah, actually, that's such a great visual too, the whole term in terms of bouncing back. You got to hit the ground to bounce back up. You can't just stop halfway through. You can't stop halfway through feeling something and get any kind of powerful bounce back again. You really have to feel it all the way.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yes. And we don't know how.
mm, mm,
And, and especially in the professional world, right? And as women, can't be too emotional.
mm.
Can't be too emotional. Or, oh, she's so dramatic, she's so emotional. We look down upon even the way in which we talk about emotions. And then if you're a man in the professional world, like forget it.
Yeah,
What emotions?
yeah.
That's not a thing.
Is there a
Um,
fear in education? And I don't know this to be true, but is there a fear to show emotion as a teacher in case it might like incite emotion in your students? Like, do you find that teachers hold it back because they don't want to trigger their students or create an environment where everyone will suddenly be too emotional?
Sure, I think that's part of it for sure. When we were working in a space with kids, I think there's a level of, well, I need to be professional,
Mm,
right? But when we're working in an environment like that, what does that word actually even mean? And who says that showing emotion isn't professional? Are
mm,
we going to, you know, let me rephrase this. We have professional discretion,
mm,
and we have to be able to create a safe space where it is okay to express emotion. And I'll give you a great example of this. A teacher I was working with, she took one of my classes. We were doing a workshop on burnout. And one of the things we had talked about was expressing anger. And one of the ways you can release is by screaming. And so she did this with her kids, and she felt anger and frustration. And she was like, I just really need to scream. Does anyone else really just need to just like, ah? And all of her kids were like, yes. So she said, okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3. And they all just went, ah. And they had this big primal scream together. So not only did she A, take care of herself, but B, she was able to teach a healthy way to express anger in a safe environment.
beautiful.
And everybody wins, and so there is a time and a place for that. And I think if we're really wanting to teach social emotional skills to our kids, we need to go through a different door. We can't just talk about it. We
Yeah.
can't put up a YouTube video about empathy and check the box that says we did social emotional learning today. This is
Mm.
about really in real time having that self-awareness of what's going on in my body. What do I need right now? And then can I go through my toolkit and pick a tool that's appropriate in that moment?
If you're listening to this podcast, chances are you didn't get into business to be miserable. The problem is that people feel that if their business gets busier, if they start becoming more successful, that happiness will eventually set in. But it can actually get worse. This is why I created the Business of Happiness Prosperity Coaching. In this one-on-one coaching, we look at how to redefine success on your terms and re-find the joy and the passion in your dream. Visit me at thebizofhappiness.com and become the happiest business owner you know. Oh, so cool. It's so fascinating because as a parent of children who are in school, what I see or hear from them is that school is your life when you're little. When you're a kid, school is 90% of who you are, right? It's where you are, it's the social interactions, it matters so much. And school itself, aspects of school, whether it's homework, tests, or social interactions, can be triggering for our students. So they're in the place where they're getting these triggers. And you just mentioned in that situation, even the teacher was triggered something what was happening in her workday. So it's so fascinating that we're in that space where we can expect and anticipate certain triggers or opportunities for us to have emotion. And for us to just check our emotions at the door is so painful to just not allow ourselves to feel those feelings throughout the day. And especially in our children, where this is a majority of their life.
How can you check your emotions at the door?
Mm,
And it's just so I've heard that growing up. We'll just check your
Mm,
emotions at the door. It doesn't work that way. And when we perpetuate that idea, we actually rob ourselves of one of the most beautiful human experiences that we have in this life, is to
mm,
feel this, huge continuum of beautiful emotions, that when we lean in and embrace it, that's really living the most holistic type of life and the most full life.
mm.
Here, especially on this podcast, which I love, we can't understand what happiness is unless we know what that other stuff is.
Yeah.
And just because it's ugly and uncomfortable doesn't mean that we need to push it down and ignore it. In fact, we need to actively look at it and say, okay, well, what do I do with this now?
Mm, mm.
And schools to me are the incubator for the world. I mean,
Mm,
this is it. And
mm.
when you think about things like our definition of success, and the things that are supposed to make us happy, what are we actually teaching? And that's the stuff that really gets my fire going, because yes, my program is focused on the adults, but it's really about the kids. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I think that's so important. And I think that sometimes we need that focus outside of ourselves in order to take care of ourselves at the beginning of our journey. I remember I remember feeling that way when I was pregnant. I remember taking the best care of my body ever because I was caring for someone else inside my body. But having that awareness then gave me the permission to take care of myself. So it's interesting that you phrase it that way as well, because that might be how we reach some educators, is reminding them this really is in the best interest of the kids to take care of yourself along the way.
Right. Well, and then especially the kids who are in the highest need, like you
Mm,
alluded to before, these kids are experiencing different triggers all day, right? But especially now in this post-COVID era, everyone's activated all the
all
time.
the time.
All the time. So if this child is acting in a certain way that's activated, that then causes you to feel activated, if you are not self-aware enough to understand how to regulate, to go ahead and deal with whatever situation, you're just going to escalate, and then it
Mhm.
gets out of control, and then it's go to the office, or it's to call your parents, or then it's like a thing where, if you understood so well that, oh gosh, my body just tensed up right now.
My body's talking to
My
me.
body's talking to me right now. And then go internally first, then all of a sudden you can actually give that child what that child needs,
Mm.
whether it's in the classroom or whether it's an additional support or whatever. But it's not elevated to a point where everyone's now activated and the other kids in the class are all watching this happen, right? So here's this thing of modeling. This is another example of real time,
Mm.
right? Doing that simple check-in of that, taking a breath to just regulate your nervous system for a second before you respond to that child can make all the difference. But you aren't going to do that if you don't have the awareness of what your body feels like when you're under stress, or then the tools of what to do with it.
Yeah, it's so interesting because within a classroom, there are so many humans, so many little spiritual beings who all have that fragility and opportunity for activation. It's just kind of amplified in a classroom setting. I'm remembering a story, Jen, of that my oldest was telling me about someone in their classroom who had a panic attack in the classroom, and it activated them.
Mhm.
They suddenly went and said, my oldest said to me, I just couldn't respond. I couldn't go and help them. I was so triggered myself. I couldn't do anything about it. And it just made me realize the domino effect that can happen within a classroom. And that really the educator, as the leader of the classroom, has such a big responsibility in that moment. And these tools would be so valuable.
Mhm. Yes, that emotional contagion is real. That's part of just our neurological response to how we connected with people. Back in the day when we were hunting and gathering, and this creating a sense of belonging was essential to our survival. So emotional contagion came from, that place where there are those mirror neurons too, where we're connected to each other. And it's interesting to see that play out in something like a classroom, like what you just described. It's totally normal situation right there. What would happen? But as the teacher, then to really set the tone and model what could be is so important. And now here's another piece of this, because as soon as teachers or school leaders hear, well, here are some more tools or
Yeah.
another responsibility you have, they're like, ah, no, wait, what? You're now telling me I need to put self-care on my plate too?
Yeah.
What is this? So what's really interesting about how I present this is, again, this is the work that will make all of the other work so much easier. That this
Mm.
isn't one other thing. We're not, doing a self-caring day. This is about really changing the way you think about how you experience your days and how you want to experience your days, and start to close the gap.
Mm. Beautiful. Beautiful. What do you think is the one sticking point that's not allowing us to, reach more teachers in this way? Like, what is the one challenge that you have in the system at the moment?
Where teachers can't get this message?
Mm.
Oh, I'm just starting out, Taryn. That's why. I think, there are programs out there that are, again, specific to kids. And where I'm coming from is it's just not enough. It's just not enough. Um, and so what I see is a new endeavor. I'm kind of trailblazing right here. So the good news is that the people who do work with me understands pretty quickly that this is game-changing stuff.
Cool.
Empowered teachers empower their students. And right now, burned out teachers are actually teaching our kids how to live in burnout.
Yeah.
And that's not why anyone wanted to sign up to be a teacher. We sign up to be a teacher because we want to change the world. We want to create an impact on even just that one child, to see, I'm going to start, this is where I get all welled up, right? To see that aha moment, to see that connection, that light that comes behind their eyes when they get something for the first time. There is no feeling like that
Mm.
in the world. And you can't do that if you're exhausted, overwhelmed, frustrated, and stressed out all the time. And we're not getting rid of the stressors.
Mm.
We are trying a different way for you to handle yourself, to understand that you are the only person responsible for how you show up in any given space. So here are the tools to help you do that better, to reach your goals and have the impact that you said that you wanted to make. So, as far as an obstacle to getting the word out, I'm building this business. That's why I'm doing it. I'm actively getting the word out, because this is game changing for the classroom, life changing for the teachers and school leaders who work with me, and this is about transformational generational change that's happening. And because think about it, right? Even just that example of the teacher who did that primal scream in her classroom, um, those kids now have that as a coping mechanism. You
Mm.
know, when I do just breathing with my teachers, and they now say, oh, well, we do this now every single time before we have a test.
Mm.
My kids have performed so much better. Of
Mm.
course they have, because they are deactivated and they can actually have access to the part of their brain that they need to take the test. So in my world, I would love to see a place where, again, this is just universal language. This is just what we do here. We breathe at the beginning of every period because we understand the importance of calming down our nervous system. We have a spot in the back of the faculty room with pool noodles and a medicine ball where someone can let out some rage if they want to, you know. Um, I think that there is a future in which this exists. I know that there's a future in which this exists.
It's beautiful. Oh, thank you. Thank you for being you. It's so amazing. I just can't say enough. I think, many times as parents, we can get overwhelmed as well when we don't know the solution, when we see the pain and suffering in our kids, and we're just sending them off to school every day, hoping that they're learning some tools. And so I'm so grateful to you for embarking on this and bringing this to the world, to the education world. I know you have some amazing courses coming up, some support for teachers, educators, and leaders this summer. Tell us a little bit about those courses and where to find them.
Sure. So my website is just empowerededucator.com, and it's all on there. I have a summer series for teachers at the end of June, a summer series for school leaders and administrators at the end of July, and a program for instructional coaches in August. And then sprinkled throughout, there's always programming. I'm always doing lives on my Facebook page and my private Facebook group. And as the year goes on, there's lots of programming that's to come. But if you want to learn more and want to work with me more closely, you can just reach out at jen@empowerededucator.com.
Awesome. Awesome. And thank you. Thank you again. Before you leave, I want to know from you, Jen, because you've been doing this work. You've been working on yourself. You've been walking the walk just as much as you have been teaching others. What is your definition of happiness?
Mm. My definition of happiness is being content with what you have right in front of you. It's so easy to look in someone else's lane or look over the yard and want that thing or
Mhm.
experience or what seems like a good relationship. But when you are really truly taking stock of what you have, and I guess that connects with incredible gratitude, um, there is so much, not just happiness, but overwhelming joy that comes with knowing and seeing what you have. That's been also huge for my journey. Like you said, I walk this walk, I practice everything that I teach, and gratitude is a game changer. So yeah, that would be my definition of happiness.
Love it. Well, we are so grateful to you for everything that you do. Thank you again, my friend.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for being here. And to all of you, thank you for being present with us today during this conversation. And as always, remember when you feel good, that's when you can do good. Bye bye.